All right, good morning, everybody. Hey, for those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Matt LeClaire. I am the commander for the Joint Pacific Multinational Readiness Center, JPMRC, um, where our purpose here at JPMRC is to create and help brigade combat teams become more prepared, combat credible readiness here in the theater. They're ready. They're in the theater in which they're going to be employed by the theater commander, and they are doing it on the terrain in which they're going to be asked to do it. Uh, JPMRC, we run three major training exercises every year and three smaller ones. We run one exercise in Alaska, we run one in Hawaii, and we run a third one in the Philippines over the summer. We choose to do it in the worst conditions that there are. We do it in the Arctic, in the most extreme cold. We do it in the jungle, in the most extreme heat with the 25th Infantry Division. And we figure out the commonalities between that and help ready forces, ready brigades for our theater army commander so that he can employ that readiness. And sometimes we're employing that readiness while we're doing the exercise. We just wrapped up our Alaska rotation. We've done so many AARs over the last few days. 10 days in the box out here in the Donnelly training area. And we recently did one of these episodes with Jimmy Howell, Spartan 6. But today I wanted to do one with Wolf 6, Colonel Chris Brawley, another friend of mine that I've known for a long time, since we were captains in company command time together. So we've known each other for a while. Chris was the OPFOR commander, the brigade commander for the OPFOR battalion that was out there in the box. He was also our exercise support group controller for the 11th Airborne Division, and Major General Hilbert was our senior trainer. And we just got done with this, again, a phenomenal rotation that we just went out here. I spent a lot of time with Chris and his folks while they were going through the box, and I felt obligated to sit down and immediately pull from you like what you learned while you were out there, and how that's going to shape the future, how we could be a better CTC and more prepared for our next rotations. Chris is one of those guys that he easily the smartest person in every room that he walks into. So I'm humbled that he shares this with me, and I feel obligated to share the things you share with me with as many people as I possibly can. And that's why I wanted to get you to do this with me here today. But before we dig into it, Chris, will you just tell us a little bit, like who you are, where you grew up, why the Army?
Sure. I was born in the UK. My mother, Pakistani. My father was a hillbilly from Missouri. I grew up and went to boarding schools in England until the age of 17. I was really inspired to join the Army by my father. He had been a floating bridge company commander in the 1950s. And so I grew up hearing these stories about the Army and what a great experience it was for him. And then his sister, my Aunt Patty, she was also critical to my decision to go to West Point. One of her many husbands had gone to West Point in the 1960s, and he became an Air Force officer. And so she convinced me, hey, if you want to become an officer in the United States Army, you ought to consider West Point. So the combination of those two people really drove me towards the Army and drove me towards going to the academy. I have two boys, married to my wife Megan for 20 years. My whole family is musicians, which frankly took me by surprise. I'm not musical at all, so my wife plays the trumpet. One son plays the cello, and the other son plays the French horn, and I'm stuck in my office like with my earplugs in. I've now been in the Army 22 years, and really I've loved the Army. I love the experience of it. There's such great people in the Army. The CSMs I've had, friends like you, friends like Jimmy Howell. It really is like a family to me. So
it shows. It shows in how you operate. It shows every time I interact with you, and when I watch you interact with your people and the people in your organization. Like it shows down to the lowest level that they absolutely feel that, and that they believe in it. So I appreciate what how you bring that, as a dad with two kids in the army right now. Like I appreciate that kind of leadership, because that's the kind of leadership that I pray that my son and daughter have, leaders like you and Jimmy. What have you heard about JPMRC, and what have you heard before, and what was some of the bias maybe that you had before we did this rotation?
So the first impression I got was I heard these rumors that it was kind of an under-resourced CTC, and that it was sort of tier two. What I found was the exact opposite. The level of sophistication behind the infrastructure behind the CTC, the people are awesome. I felt like it was a true training experience. It was not. It was less a test and more being trained. And I truly feel that everyone who took part in JPMRC felt the same way. The quality of your OCs is outstanding. The feedback they've provided, they're more in the background than you normally see OCs. They coach through the leadership of the unit, which is a much different philosophy than you sometimes see.
Yeah, we couldn't do JPMRC the way that we do it right now if it wasn't for the support of the divisions, the 11th and the 25th, the support of Corps, the support of United States Army Pacific, and then most importantly, the support of JRTC. So a lot of the OCs that come out here and augment JPMRC, they are pros back from JRTC. And you're like, well, why do we need all that augmentation? Well, because the 196th has a mission to support and certify the mobilization of the Hawaii National Guard and Reserve, the Alaska National Guard, which we have 2nd Battalion in Alaska, and the National Guard in Guam, which is where our 3rd Battalion is. So we are manned right now for the 196th mission. We have taken on the JPMRC, Joint Pacific Multinational Ready. It used to be the capability. Now it's center, right? And so the Army has approved us to be at 471 people to run the Army's newest CTC. But those people, as we all know, they don't just show up. You don't just all of a sudden get 350 more people, right? And so we are in this process of prioritizing what billets we fill first and how we start to build. We focused on the ops group, but we could not do it if it wasn't for the support that we get from JRTC and those OCs. Specifically, the engineers, the aviation task force, the artillery task force. We don't have those built in the MTO right now of JPMRC or of the 196th. It's coming, and we will get there with a slow build, but right now we don't. And so we are dependent on the relationships that we have with them in order to round out our OC. While we were out there, we allowed you as to be a part, to have your brigade TAC, to get some repetitions while this exercise was going on. And you said, hey, can we put that in the box? And the senior trainer said, absolutely. I can see nothing but goodness that can come from having you out there. What did you learn from being out there? What'd you see?
So our idea was we're running a lot of the backside support for the ISB and then also back at Fort Wainwright. And so we saw this tremendous opportunity to exercise the brigade TAC in a tactical environment and basically get an early rep in. And this experience is going to completely change our training path, I think. After the things that I felt and experienced and saw myself. Some big ticket lesson learned. We have got to create a culture of fires. So I think at the infantry companies tend to want to get into a firefight, and creating that culture of fires is going to help help us win. That's one of the things I learned from the experience. The other thing I learned was actually from you, Matt. When we were riding around, Matt very kindly allowed us to ride around with him for a day. And I remember you saying something to the effect of, it's less important about how you're communicating and actually more important to focus on what you're communicating. And so that was a really eye-opening moment for me, because it made me realize we've got to practice the processes and systems of tactical reporting much earlier than we were planning to. And so my plan is to develop a series of CPXs where we're basically practicing that reporting with the battalion talks, the brigade talk, the fires piece. It is very hard to get all of that system to work properly together. That's really one of the big ticket lessons learned from Jimmy Howell.
I think a lot of sometimes our young folks that are learning how to fight in the Army, and they've got so much on their plate, right? If you're a lieutenant, company commander, platoon sergeant, first sergeant that's out there, right? They got so much on their plate. And there's so many new technologies that they're trying to figure out how to make ones and zeros come together and such. But if it was 100% clear what the message was that I was trying to get to my next level of command, or I'm 100% clear what needs to happen, and I need to tell my platoons, or if I'm the battalion, I need to tell the companies, I know what I need to tell them and what they need to do. How we do it becomes much easier, because sometimes it's, can you just take a picture of this sketch and send it to them? Yes, that's all you wanted to do. Or can you take a carbon copy of this and deliver it to them, hand delivered? Yes. Or I need to see them face to face to communicate this message. It's the only way I can communicate this message that needs to be communicated. I need you to pick up the pace, or I need you to slow down a little bit, or I need you to be a better team player. You know, some things only can be communicated through certain means.
Yeah, I totally agree. Another thing I learned was the importance of battlefield circulation. Sometimes what appears on the map is absolutely not what is happening on the ground, and especially up here in the Arctic. So, I'll give an example of that. If you have a bunch of infantry companies in a line and you call that the flot, what's in most infantrymen's mind is defensive positions tied in with each other. That may not be the case. As we drove through both the 211 lines and the 111 lines, both had a very different posture on the front lines than what was actually in my head. So,
or what was on a map,
or especially what was on it was definitely nothing like what it looked like on the map. So that is really important. The last thing I'll describe is just watching how 211 came into the blocks. The sequencing, when you bring in what asset, became critical, and it basically, to put it bluntly, that by not having a cavalry squadron out postured ahead of the infantry, it just caused all kinds of issues for the first half of the exercise. And so we're going to have to figure out how we sequence into the blocks properly to prevent it becoming cascading effects from affecting us.
Yeah.
So that was another key tip. I'd probably go on for like an hour on that.
Sure, but I do want to keep going on. What was it? Right, it was reconnaissance and security is what it was. Is that whoever was winning the reconnaissance and security part of the mission was winning at that moment.
That's true.
And for the first 3 or 4 days, the enemy had gained and maintained contact with the Blue Four, figured out, gave them no room to breathe, and called for fire on them the whole time without taking any casualties. Right.
Yep.
And then when the tide turned was when 211, the Blue Four, was able to immediately gain and maintain contact with the enemy who was on the run at that point, and never let up and continued to call for fire.
Yep.
And now use humans.
And I think the other part was getting their fires infrastructure in place and working the way it's supposed to. Once that occurred, they started having some success. But you know, I think it's
Yeah.
easy to underestimate how difficult it is to do a joint force blood entry operation. You know, you come out of that and you're just a mess. Like you know, Jimmy was telling me, you know, mortars landing on the wrong airfield, you know, equipment not where you being able to get accountability. It's easy
Yeah.
it's easy to just, you know, shuck that
Right.
problem in the trash.
Well, for example, their cavalry the intent was to use 3 HLZs that were 3 to 4 kilometers south out in the front of the infantry battalions. Well, when the helicopters went to land into those HLZs, they found that the enemy had fouled them. The enemy fouled them because they had an additional 24 hours to prepare. The enemy was continuing along its march, and they had to land all the way in the rear. So the cavalry ended up landing in the rear and started at the back,
Yep.
the back of the train, behind the infantry battalions, to start things off.
Yep.
So we don't even at JPMRC or JRTC. Sometimes you don't even have to create the variables; they create themselves. The challenges create themselves. Just executing this is difficult business in which we're in to synchronize. You can know what you want to do, but doing it is much more. Talk a little bit more about how you're going to modify. You said we're going to modify the training plan going forward. What kind of things?
Yeah, I realize now we already had a staff training plan in place, but what I realized is that the brigade staff and the battalion staffs, they can easily just lose the fight by not transmitting orders and not transmitting intent very clearly. And so all of the friction that involves how does the brigade talk to the battalions, we're going to have to sort that out. So I'm dead certain we're going to basically, you know, once a month or so have some kind of a CPX, and it's going to have to be you know, crawl, walk, run. We're going to have to get our reports straight. I'm going to steal all of Jimmy's products from 211, and get the reports straight. Then you start the reporting. Then how do you transmit orders over the various systems that we have? And you know, a lot of times when you talk to brigade commanders or you see them, you know, we're both in the email chain with a bunch of brigade commanders. One of the things that the top topic is mission command systems, and so we're gonna have to get some practice at it.
Yeah.
You know, and incorporate it into training events that are already there. I also think that we're already in a sort of mastery of the fundamentals mode. And so what we're trying to do is all the skill level 1 tasks, like just changing magazines, everything is a lot more difficult is in the Arctic. The more we focus on that, the less it causes compounding friction when it comes to a brigade level operation. So, and we're also going to have to make some adjustments based on what I saw from the reconnaissance and security perspective.
Yeah.
Because the CAV squadron, as you know, because of the new R-Struck is going away, we'll still have a CAV squadron by the time our JPMRC rotation comes, but it may be smaller. It may not be the same size as it currently is. We'll have to make some adjustments based on that, and then breeding the culture of fires. Getting people in the call for fire trainer, that is going to be critical.
One of the things I told Colonel Howell was for next year, all of our fire markers, I'm going to ask that they be scouts, cavalrymen, they be the kind of people that are going to be calling for fire, because the whole rotation then becomes practice for them, finding the grid, moving to the point, the guns are laid on, they're ready, and then they can see if it was effective or not effective, and they can see what it feels like to be on the other end of that mission, and to see when you just missed it. The enemy was here, you called for fire, the enemy continues to move, and now your rounds land in an area that is not effective.
Yeah.
It's hard to see that, from a talk, and it's easier to see that's just something that we'll be doing. When you said, work through our reports, right? You said we're going to get out there and we're going to do some rehearsals and we're going to work through our PSOPs and our SOPs. Every unit has SOPs, and every unit has a TAC SOP, and every unit has a PSOP. Why do some units do it? This is you don't have to answer this, but why do some units do it really well and some units really struggle. Well, they go out and they rehearse, right? But when they rehearse, sometimes you say, hey, what I put in the PSOP doesn't work for me. And I'll give you an example. I went into one of the first commander's update briefs that Jimmy and his guys did, right? And they pulled up the slide, and it was straight out of their SOP. This is how a commander or a staff member gives an update to their commander. And they did it. And as soon as they did it, he's like, that is not helpful. Like, number of gallons, not helpful. Need to know how many days that's going to supply X amount of vehicles or which vehicles. Number of people in the box, not helpful. What is our combat power? How many platoons? How many companies? How many batteries? And such. And they made that change immediately. They immediately changed the reporting requirements for those briefs. So doing the rehearsals will show that which systems, you just not need a format. You need a format that works for Chris Brawley. Because what worked for Jimmy Howell might not work for Chris Brawley. Once you hear your own voice and your folks dial through that and how they communicate.
Yeah, I think it might be a huge assumption to say that all units have tag subs and PSOPs.
Yeah.
Because I've been in multiple units where they just did not exist. And especially in a unit like the 11th Airborne Division that's brand new, it's 2 years old, we're still, it feels like a fully operating division, but some of those like basic steps, like establishing SOPs, I'm convinced that if I go down, there's at least a few battalions I'm sure that just don't have those systems in place. One thing that really helped us as the brigade staff was taking part in Warfighter. Because the Warfighter, we did a Warfighter like 30 or 40 days ago, and there's a direct continuity of training between the Warfighter and this JPMRC. The staff started to get a feel for how I like reports, what systems we ought to be using. The division is now using Maven on Palantir for the first time and really like it. So guess what? Like we know we need to be masters of Maven and Palantir. So, and our folks are already good at it. However, if you go below the brigade level, that's going to have to get translated down to the battalion. So what does that mean? It probably means somebody on the brigade staff has an ATAC and Maven next to each other and is swivel sharing it so that the same information is getting passed down. That's the kind of thing that if you don't have it right, it will desync your operations because you're not, a common operating picture is not common if everyone's not looking at the same thing.
We talked about the training plan now, but now I want to talk about like what it takes to survive in the North. You got the rules of the North, right? The three rules of the North that are up here. How do you kind of start off with those rules in the North, and how does that kind of turn into a unit that can survive and then thrive in the Arctic?
That's a great question. So the rules of the North. The first rule is prepare like no one's coming. And if you think about just living in the North, if you're just driving home from the supermarket, if your car goes off the road or you get in a snowbank, there's no one coming to get you. And so we take that same approach to how we train. 211 and the division headquarters is 5 or 6 hours away by vehicle. And so everything that we do, we try to be self-sufficient and take care of ourselves. The second rule is everything takes longer in the Arctic. So whether it's changing a tire or putting on your boots, you can just imagine like putting on snowshoes when it's minus 40, your fingers are numb. Just trying to do anything simple, the friction just compounds when you add this ridiculous temperatures up here. And then third, it's never summer. Winter is always coming. And so in the summertime, what that means is our mind is always on the next winter. You're already like preparing your tents, preparing your sleds, conducting field maintenance on them. And it's almost like it's definitely like a culture thing here. And it's also, it's embedded in the NCO Corps here. We have some amazing NCOs that have been operating up here for years. And the amount that I have learned from these guys, It is phenomenal. My CSM, Sergeant Major Wagner, this is his. I think it's his third time up here, and there's the amount of stuff that I learn about just like taking care of yourself in the Arctic is amazing. It's amazing tricks that he's been able to pass on.
I love how when I came up here, I noticed like people just quickly say, "Hey, my name is Sergeant Leclerc. I'm on my 8th winter,"
Yeah,
and they always just throw out there how many winters that they have up here,
yeah,
and it gives you an idea about how experienced they are.
yeah. It's amazing. And the other thing I was going to say, that there's a fourth rule of the North that is kind of under the table, and that is everything breaks at -40, except for the will of the Arctic wolves. And what that means is that literally everything will break at -40. I've seen rubber hoses, fuel hoses that are like this thick around, like shatter at -40. But there's like a level of grit that is required to be up here, and the soldiers at the junior level have it. It's really cool to see.
Yeah.
So that's the rules of the North.
Those are the rules of the North, and you started to dabble into what makes the Arctic wolves special. Like what makes them different. They were a striker unit for a little while. Now we're not anymore. They deal with the Arctic. They're always preparing for winter. What are some of the other things that make Arctic wolves special?
So I would say first and foremost, it's the junior NCOs. If you're a junior NCO in the Arctic Wolves, your soldiers know that if you're messed up, they might lose fingers and toes. And so there's like a level of accountability in the junior NCO Corps that you don't normally see. If a soldier in the Arctic Wolves just goes for a run, and doesn't have their ears covered with their fleece cap, you're going to get frostbite on the bottom of your ears. And so there's also a level of grit with up here that I'm not sure that I've ever seen before. They are willing to, essentially there's kind of a trick to operating up in the Arctic. The soldiers, you have to kind of hold a carrot out in front of them, because it sucks when you're out there at -35 trying to put up a tent. But if they know that they know when they're going to get their next warm meal, and they know when they're going to get into shelter in the warmth, they will literally fight forever, because they always know. And so that is throughout the formation. And so people kind of know, if I'm not getting taken care of, at -40, people will just quit. And so when you have these junior level leaders who are that engaged and know, hey, you have to have food and you have to have warmth, or you will literally die. It just creates a different culture that I've never seen anywhere else. It's cool.
Yeah, and you can't just quit when it's out there, because if you quit, you die.
Yeah.
And so they can't just quit on each other while they're out there. When you said like the sergeants and the junior NCOs, I went to the cold weather orientation course, the CWAC, with the CG and all of the senior leaders from the 11th Airborne Division as well. And we were being coached by sergeants and staff sergeants that were out there. There was like one sergeant first class, but they had been through so many winters and miles, and they'd climbed so many mountains. But they were the absolute pros when it came to teaching us how to build these thermal shelters and how to move and wear the snowshoes and the proper way to layer and delayer at any moment, and dragging an Accio. So I have an appreciation for that. When they say things move slowly, it's not because people are being lazy. It's because everywhere you go, you're bringing your house behind you as a squad, and as soon as you stop, someone has to go into setting up the shelter, because like in the heat, when you start to work for 10 minutes and rest for 50, at -40, it's rest for an hour. Like everybody's inside the shelter, right?
Yeah.
Or it's work for 10, rest for 50, work for 20, depending on the temperatures, and you got to be able to do it. I've noticed this teamwork between the 11th Airborne Division. It's pretty special up here. General Hilbert's he's created this environment with his team where I don't feel the competitiveness. I don't feel like, yeah, we want to win. Yeah, I want to do well while I'm out there. But I want my teammates to learn from my experience and learn and be better off in the future. I assume you see the same thing because you're a part of that.
100%. Like, I don't know any other CTC rotation where the OPFOR commander and the brigade commander had a daily chat.
Yeah.
Like, I called Colonel Howell every night. I'll admit, I messed with his top personnel a few times and
Yeah.
threw out some vitamin in the neck. But we were, you know, if it's good for First Brigade, but it's not good for the division, then it's not good for First Brigade.
Yeah.
And so everybody kind of has that mentality where we're all in it to make the whole unit better. Even, you know, the Army, the Arctic Aviation Command, Colonel Howell's brigade, First Brigade, the garrison folks. It is like a really good team up here.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, we're all friends.
Yeah.
So it makes for a really good environment.
Yeah.
You're right though. It's better than I've seen in other places.
Yeah. And being a part of that conversation, there was one night where I remember we were deciding where they were going to defend from, with me and General Hilbert, and like, where should they defend from? Where would their line be? How should the attack come? You know, whereas the COG, I'm providing the scenario, I'm providing, you know, to achieve those training objectives. And you said something. You said, although I would want to do this as a living and breathing enemy, we need to do this so that they can get the training objective of, say, the defense. And the example for folks is that, you know, how would our adversary fight? If our adversary knew you had obstacles and our adversary knew you were in a defense, they would just sit back and they would rain and direct fire on you for days until they try to break your will. They would not attack right into it, right? But we attacked into it because we wanted to test the ability to synchronize fires, to test the obstacle belts, to test their ability to communicate back and forth for those defenses. And so there became a method to the madness, and you were absolutely a huge part of that. And we wouldn't have been able to do it as effectively as I think we did without you being out there. So one of the last things I usually do when we wrap these things up is like, so we talked about that. We've done all this. You've thrown a lot of things out there, but like, so what? The big so what? What's the one piece of advice you kind of got for us, or for folks that are listening right now, that maybe we didn't already talk about right here?
Yeah. So if I were going to any CTC rotation, there's one thing I would do. I would read General Bolger's book, The Battle for Hunger Hill. In that book, so in the course of like 6 months, he went on a rotation and it was a disaster. And then he came back from that rotation and basically had an AAR with his battalion. This is in the 1990s. Comes back from the rotation, has an AAR, and it's like, we are not going to allow this to happen to us again. And then he refights, 6 months later. All of the things that he talks about in that book are the same exact issues that 2nd Brigade and our OPFOR ran into this time. It's questions about mission command, size of command posts, survivability, synchronizing fires. How do you get speedy fires onto the enemy? Even though the book is now 30 years old, any commander who reads that will at least, at the very least, even if you don't agree with everything that General Bolger writes, you'll at least have some ideas about how you want to solve some of those problems. That's my golden piece of advice.
I love that, husband of a wife who's a librarian. At the last thing, the one thing you bring up is a book for us all to kind of to take a look at. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you sharing this with me. I appreciate you sharing it with everybody. Because my goal is to take what we're learning out here and these conversations and share them with as many people as we possibly can, so that we can continuously be learning a little bit better today than we were yesterday. That was the goal of JPMRC every single day. You don't come out here to win necessarily. You come out here to get better every single day, and you walk away at the end. And winners are the people that feel like they're better today than they were yesterday, and the people that are around them are better because they're around them. And I'm better for being around you this whole time. So I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, I had a great time. We were lucky to have such a great rotation. It was so much teamwork from your OCs and the division headquarters and second brigade. It was awesome.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.